Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make my gluten-free cherry pineapple filled cookies. And we'll get to the filling in just a minute. The first thing we need to do is make our cookie dough, and then it needs to chill in the fridge for a little bit. So I've got 1 cup of butter, and this makes a lot of cookies, but they're sandwich cookies. So you really want a lot of dough so you can have a lot of cookies that have a top and a bottom. And I'm not ready for the butter yet. So in this bowl, I've got 5 cups of my gluten-free flour. I've got 1 teaspoon of salt and a half a teaspoon of baking soda. And we don't really even have to mix this. It's such a small amount for all of the flour, but there you go. So I've got 1 cup of butter that's pretty soft room temperature. Maybe not soft enough. Let's go in the microwave for just a second. And really minimal ingredients that go into this cookie dough. Just a few dry ingredients. I've got 5 eggs. I've got 2 teaspoons of vanilla and a 1/4 teaspoon of almond extract, and then 3/4 of a cup of honey. So this looks really good. And I should mention, I got my new oven delivered the other day. And I cooked a little bit with it, and it's doing really good. And it looks very, very similar to my last oven. So in goes my 3/4 of a cup of honey. And I do have everything at room temperature. And I know it sounds kind of contradictory to have everything at room temperature just to throw it in the fridge and chill it. But having things at room temperature really make it easier to mix in and make a nice dough. And for that matter, you could have made this dough yesterday or last week and had it in the freezer. So just mix your honey and your butter together. Once you've got that all mixed together, I'm going to start adding in my eggs, probably a couple at a time. And my 2 teaspoons of vanilla and 1/4 teaspoon of almond extract. Try not to make a mess. And I'm going to go the last of my eggs, all 3. I'm going to start adding in my flour a little bit at a time. And I'm going to use the whisk to start, and then I'll switch to my spatula. Go a little more flour. And the last of my flour. And as always, scrape the bowl as you go, sides and bottom. And while you're stirring it together, using all of your muscle, you might think that this is actually a nice stiff dough that we could roll out right now. But it is still really soft. So I've got a couple of pieces of plastic wrap here. I like to divide my dough in half and wrap it in plastic to chill in the fridge. I find that it chills down a little bit quicker, and because we're going to be rolling this dough out, I don't want it to be a big blob in my bowl. It's a lot harder to manage and start rolling out, especially if you've let your dough chill overnight. And because it's such a large amount of dough, it's easier to roll out half at a time than trying to manage all of the dough at one time. Which also makes this dough perfect for going into the freezer. Then you could put just half of it in the freezer and bake half of the cookies. So once I get it in the plastic wrap, I like to flatten it out a little bit. As I mentioned, we're going to be rolling this out with a rolling pin, so it kind of gives it a head start that's flat already. How'd I do? Not exactly the same size, but that's all right. So these go in the fridge, and then we'll get our filling ready. So for the filling, I'm using my food processor. It just makes super fast, easy work. And then we will be cooking it on the stove. I've got a 12-ounce package of frozen cherries that I thawed yesterday. And I thawed them in the bowl so I can save as much juice as I can that came off of my cherries. Now this recipe, when I first started making these cookies, of course I wasn't gluten-free, but I also still used regular sugar. And the filling was actually made with maraschino cherries, which made a really nice pink filling for our cookies. As much as I liked maraschino cherries, I don't like the sugar syrup and I don't like the food coloring that's in them. So I just used frozen cherries. And the original recipe, it doesn't call for pineapple in the filling either. But I was going through my pantry and I found this jar of freeze-dried pineapple. And I would say it's probably going to be about a half a cup of pineapple when it's rehydrated and all chopped up in the food processor. I really like cherry and pineapple together. Now that being said, you could make this cookie dough and put your own filling inside of it. You could use jam, you could use whatever you like, marmalade. And I don't care if there's pulp in my filling, but I don't want any seeds. So sacrifice the pulp just in case there's some seeds. So that was 2 oranges. It looks like 2 more oranges will do it. And if I end up with a little bit of extra juice, it's okay because my pineapple needs extra liquid to rehydrate. The main thing that we're looking for with our filling is we want it to be the right consistency because it will be going in the oven, even though we're going to cook it first on the stove top. So you want a filling that will be thick enough when it's in the oven that it won't just melt all over the place. So if you're using jam or something like that, you might need to put it on the stove top and get it a little bit thicker with some cornstarch. So it looks like my 4 smallish oranges gave me just over a cup of orange juice. Now again, you don't have to use a food processor. I just find it makes really fast, easy work to cut up our cherries. Juice and all. And I'm just going to start breaking up my freeze-dried pineapple and throwing it in here. One of the things I like about freeze-dried pineapple, first of all, it's delicious. Second of all, once it's rehydrated, it might not have the texture that you would like for a fruit platter, but it works perfectly in recipes like this. We're going to cook it anyways. I'm going to dump in my just over 1 cup of orange juice. Depending on how much liquid my pineapple absorbs, I may need to add a little bit of water. And this looks really good. It will get thicker as the pineapple absorbs the liquid. I wanted my cherries and the pineapple to be pretty finely chopped so we don't have a really big chunk of cherry or pineapple in our cookie. So that looks really good. So in my saucepan here, I do have a half a cup of honey already in here. And then I've got 2 tablespoons of butter, 3 tablespoons of cornstarch, and I'm going to turn this on about medium-high. In goes our pineapple and cherries and orange juice. We want to bring this up to a boil. Now that my mixture is up to a boil, I'm going to boil and stir for 1 minute. So after 1 minute, I'm going to take it off the heat and pour it right back in the bowl that my cherries were in. I don't want it to keep cooking in the hot pan, and I want it to cool off to at least room temperature. We don't want to put a hot filling onto our cookies. It will melt our cookies before they even make it to the oven. And it looks really good. I expect it to get quite a bit thicker as it cools, as things like this do. But I also expect my pineapple to make this a lot thicker as well. And it's the funniest thing. Out of all of the smells that are coming out of this, pineapple is what I'm smelling the most. I'm going to taste it. It's really hot. That is really good. It's the perfect amount of sweet. Of course, these are sweet cherries. These are the dark red Bing cherries. And so they're a sweeter cherry than a pie cherry that's really tart. But it's just got the perfect amount of sweetness in there. So I've got my oven preheated to 400. I've got my cherry pineapple filling back there on my cooling rack. And I'm taking out 1/2 of my dough. And it is nice and chilled, but still somewhat pliable. And then I've got some of my gluten-free flour. I've got 2 cookie sheets lined with parchment paper. You don't have to put these on parchment paper. You could put these on a lightly greased cookie sheet, but I like to put them on parchment paper just in case my fruit filling comes out of the cookie. Then it's easy cleanup and you don't have cooked on fruit on your cookie sheet. Now, as for cookie cutters, I'm doing hearts today because Valentine's Day is coming up. So we're gonna make 2 cookies for each cookie, if that makes sense. So we'll do one for the bottom, that will be this, and then we'll do one for the top. And then I have a little mini cookie cutter that will cut out the center of the top, put in some filling, and then put our top cookie with the window on top of it. And it makes a really cute little window cookie that you can see your filling. And I really like these cookies for Valentine's Day because the reddish inside is really cute and perfect for Valentine's Day. And then I've got a little ruffled edge heart and a little mini one. And then I have kind of a crookedy heart and another little crookedy middle one. You could make these for any holiday in any shape that you like. So I like to keep my cookie dough moving. And if you notice that it breaks apart a little bit, just squish it back together. Well, you want to use flour for dusting and to keep it so it doesn't stick. You don't want to add in too much extra flour to your dough. And if you feel like this is too much dough to work with at one time, you can divide this dough in half and just work with your dough in quarters. If at any point you feel like your dough is getting too soft to work with, just stick it back in the fridge. Now, I like my cookies to be somewhere between 1/4 inch thick and 1/2 inch thick. The thicker you go, the longer they take to bake, and they might burn around the edges before they're done. So try to get it as thin as you can, but you also want it to be a sturdy enough cookie to hold our filling. So then just start cutting out your cookies. And make sure that you have enough for the top and the bottom. And we don't have to worry about re-rolling our dough, but I do try to get as many cookies out of one roll as I can. You could bake the small heart that's on the inside that makes our window, but I usually don't. I usually just re-roll it and put it back in to the regular dough. Now that we've got cookies that should fill up the first cookie sheet, I'm going to use my offset spatula, dipped in flour if you need it, and start putting our cookies on our parchment lined cookie sheet. These little offset spatulas really help when you're transferring kind of a delicate cookie dough like this. Try not to mess up your top. But there, you can just squish it back together. And if you need to clean up the edges a little bit, just squish it in. Oops. And then just take out the center. Now, even though this cookie cutter has kind of the ruffled edge, it doesn't really show So it doesn't really matter if you have a ruffled edge, but I think they look kind of cute. You just mash your dough back together. And if you feel like it's getting too soft, you can stick it back in the fridge. So I've got all of my tops there. And this isn't quite enough to fill up the cookie sheet, but you get the idea. Now bring over your chilled filling. And mine is still barely warm in the middle, and that's just fine. I'm gonna separate my cookies a little bit more. Normally I would fill up a cookie sheet a little bit more, but this is okay. So take a little bit of your filling, and the funniest thing is my filling actually, it looks like raspberry filling because of the pineapple in there. You need to leave a border to stick the lid on. You also don't want to put too much filling in that it will just melt out in the oven. And I said you could make these cookies any shape that you want, but be mindful of what shape you're using and how difficult it might be to put the filling in the middle. There we go. Now take a top that goes with the cookie. Very carefully place that on top. Line it up. And you want to make sure you get your center hole cut out of there in the middle. And then take a fork and very lightly press the edges together. Dipping in flour if you need to. And I know there are cookies out there that are filled with jam that have a little window in them, and you dust them with powdered sugar. We won't be dusting these with powdered sugar, but you can if you want to. I think those are called a Linzer cookie. So very similar, but not exactly. Oh, squishing out my filling on this cookie. That's all right. And you can see why you don't want your filling to be really hot going in the center of your cookie. It will soften your dough too much, and then it will just kind of melt in the oven instead of baking like a cookie. And I'm showing you one pan at a time today, but in the past when I make this recipe, the easiest thing that I have found is to get all of the cookies cut out and placed on the cookie sheet, and then put them in the fridge. And then you can go back and fill them, and then they're not too soft going into the oven. But they're so cute already. Brush off any excess flour. Oh, I broke my heart. It's a terrible thing to say. Oh, squishing out some filling. Got a little generous. Besides my one that has a lot of filling squishing out, they look so cute and such a fun festive cookie for Valentine's Day. So these will go in the oven at 400 for 8 to 10 minutes. I start checking them at 8 minutes, although because I have a new oven, I'm going to start checking probably at 7 minutes. My cookies have been going for about 10 minutes, and this is exactly what you want them to look like. You want them to be golden brown around the edges, and I don't know if you can see or not, but you can actually put them fairly close to each other on the cookie sheet. Now, because they are still super hot, of course they just came out of the oven, but they are fairly fragile when they first come out. But you see they're holding together really well, but I can't flip one over and show you the back side just yet. Here's one that's been cooled off for quite a while. So you want it to be golden brown around the edges, and of course on the bottom. Once they cool off completely, they're a little more sturdy. If I were to flip one upside down that just came out of the oven, of course it's really hot and it would probably fall apart, and the filling might drip out. But the cooled off ones really are a little more sturdy, and they smell so good, and I haven't even tasted one yet. Of course, I've been making these cookies for many years, but this is the first year I added some pineapple in to my cherry filling. And once they are completely cooled off, you can stack them. I have them kind of stacked so they're not directly on top of each other. You don't want them to stick together, and you don't want the bottom to get soggy from touching the filling. And you can see it really is a nice amount of cookie to filling ratio. And don't worry if you don't like cherries or if you don't like pineapple. It's just a basic cookie recipe, and you can fill it with whatever fruit you like. So good. I love pineapple and cherries together. And you know, I think I was spot on with my ratio of pineapple. If it was fully rehydrated, or if you want to add in fresh pineapple, it was about a half a cup of pineapple to the amount of cherries that we used. But I really think it's the perfect amount. Freeze-dried fruit, it really retains so much of its flavor. But it really is a delicious filling. This is a really good amount of cookies to give away as a nice little Valentine treat. If you have a cute little gift plate or even a gift bag, be a little careful with the gift bag. Again, you don't want them to stack so the inside will stick to each other. And then the cookie part itself, it's a really delicious cookie. It's kind of a cross between a sugar cookie and a pie crust texture. It's delicious and soft, but also kind of flaky and crispy at the same time. And I already told you how delicious my filling is. From now on, I'm always going to add pineapple in to my filling. And if you're new here to my channel, you might not be aware that I have a freeze dryer, and that's how I got my freeze-dried pineapple. But here on my channel, I've got a few freeze-drying videos. Go ahead and check those out. And you don't have to make these cookies for Valentine's Day. I just think they look so cute with the heart shape and then the cherry filling. Let me know what you think if you make this recipe. I'm gonna eat the rest of this. Let me know if you decide to do a different fruit filling. But thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, and I'll see you on the next one.